The silence before the storm. The endless void of space stretched infinitely, stars flickering like distant embers scattered across a black sea. It was a vast and empty frontier, beautiful yet unforgiving, silent yet filled with secrets that humanity was only beginning to uncover. A single warship drifted through the cosmic abyss, its hull gliding effortlessly past clusters of asteroids and forgotten celestial debris. The ship, the HSS Resolute, was humanity's finest, a masterpiece of engineering, built for both exploration and war. Its sleek frame was a fusion of cutting-edge technology and hardened military craftsmanship. Armor plating coated the ship's exterior, reinforced with ablative shielding, while its weapon systems, an array of railguns, plasma turrets, and missile silos, rested in silence, awaiting the call to action. On the command deck, Captain Elias Rains stood with arms crossed, gazing out at the endless ocean of stars. His dark brown eyes were fixed on the vast unknown ahead, yet his mind was restless. Experience had taught him that deep space was never truly quiet. It was a place of lurking dangers, where death could come in the form of unseen threats, a malfunctioning engine, a rogue asteroid, or worse, an enemy ship waiting in the dark. His first officer, Commander Adira Vasquez, stood beside him, her posture sharp and disciplined. The dim glow of the holographic interface cast a soft blue hue on her features. "Still no contacts," she reported, scanning the latest sensor readings. "We've swept this sector twice. It's empty." Elias exhaled through his nose. "It's never empty. Something is out there." The crew had been navigating the Velura Expanse, a remote and unexplored region of the galaxy. Their mission was simple: survey and chart any potential habitable worlds while securing critical resources for the United Earth Confederation. But deep down, Elias knew that was only the official reason. The real reason they were out here was far more dangerous. The Confederation had intercepted encrypted transmissions, alien in origin. Strange, cryptic signals that hinted at something lurking in the expanse, something unknown. And if there was one truth about the universe, it was that the unknown was rarely friendly. The bridge hummed with the quiet murmur of officers performing their routine checks. Lieutenant Kane, the ship's weapons specialist, leaned over his console, his fingers tapping the controls with rhythmic precision. "All weapon systems at optimal readiness," he muttered, barely looking up. From the engineering station, Chief Shienna Hawthorne shook her head with a chuckle. "Kane, you sound disappointed. Hoping for a fight already." Kane smirked, running a hand through his short blonde hair. "Not hoping, just preparing. The last time we went this deep into uncharted space, things got messy." Sienna rolled her eyes, but Elias felt the same. The deeper they traveled, the heavier the air became. The silence was unnatural, a stillness that felt less like peace and more like the calm before a storm. Then the alarms blared. A sharp, ear-piercing klaxon rang through the ship, flashing red lights illuminating the command deck. The serene silence was shattered in an instant as the bridge crew sprang into action. "Captain, we've got movement," Vasquez shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Elias snapped his attention to the main screen as data streamed across the holographic display. At first, it showed nothing but empty space, but then, a ripple, a distortion in the blackness, barely perceptible. Then, one by one, they appeared. Ghostly, sleek, and massive, the alien warships emerged from the void like wraiths from a nightmare. Their dark, chitinous hulls reflected the distant starlight, their forms jagged and angular, built for war. "Cloaked ships," Vasquez muttered in horror. Elias's stomach twisted. Cloaking technology of this caliber was rare. Humanity had barely begun to experiment with it, and even then, their attempts were rudimentary at best. But these vessels, they had been hiding right under their noses, unseen, watching. Kane's fingers flew over his console, reading 6 ships. No, wait, 12. Damn it, they keep appearing. We're surrounded. A chilling realization set in. This wasn't a random encounter. It was an ambush. The alien fleet moved with terrifying precision, closing the distance between them at an alarming speed. Their ships left no energy trails, no emissions, just silent, deadly efficiency. They had been waiting for the Resolute to stray too far into the expanse, and now the trap was sprung. Hostile intent confirmed, Vasquez said grimly. They're charging weapons. A voice, cold and emotionless, crackled through the comms. Human vessel, your presence is a violation. You have trespassed into Dominion territory. Power down your engines and surrender, or be destroyed. Silence gripped the bridge. Elias's jaw clenched. He didn't recognize the species. The Dominion. He had heard no records of them, seen no encounters in past logs. They were new. That meant one of two things. Either they had remained hidden for a reason, or they were powerful enough that no one had survived an encounter to tell the tale. His hands curled into fists. No response. They fired first. Kane's voice was tense. We're outgunned. Those ships are battleship class. We're a single warship. Elias's mind raced. Surrender was not an option. They had seen the ship's capabilities, its weaknesses. If they let themselves be captured, they'd be handing humanity's technological secrets to an unknown enemy. But fighting meant certain death. Elias exhaled sharply and straightened his shoulders. Vasquez, calculate an emergency warp jump. Now. Sir, if we don't fight back, they'll tear through our shields before we can. We can't fight a fleet this size. Our job is to survive and bring back this information to the Confederation. Elias's voice was firm, unwavering. Get us out of here. Before Vasquez could respond, the enemy ships moved. The first shot ripped through space like a bolt of lightning. A massive energy lance fired from the lead alien warship, streaking toward them at impossible speeds. Impact. The Resolute shuddered violently as the energy blast slammed into its forward shields. The force of the explosion sent a tremor through the ship, knocking officers from their seats and sending sparks flying from the control panels. Shields dropped by 40% in an instant. The Dominion wasn't just testing them. They were going for the kill. Elias grabbed the railings, steadying himself. Return fire. Target their lead ship. We need to buy time. The Resolute's cannons roared to life. Bright blue plasma streaked across the void, slamming into the Dominion warship's hull. A direct hit, but no damage. The alien vessel's hull absorbed the impact like water swallowing a stone. Kane's face paled. Their armor is adaptive. Our shots aren't penetrating. A second Dominion warship fired. Another impact. Shields down to 30%. They wouldn't survive another full barrage. Vasquez's voice was tight with urgency. Captain, warp jump coordinates locked. Elias didn't hesitate. Engage warp now. The Resolute's engine screamed as the jump drive activated. For a moment, reality itself seemed to stretch, pulling the ship toward the safety of hyperspace. Just as the Dominion fleet fired their final, killing shot, a blinding light filled the bridge. And then, they were gone. The HSS Resolute vanished into the void, escaping the jaws of certain death. But Elias knew one thing for certain. The Dominion had made their first move, and humanity had just become their next target. The hunt begins. The HSS Resolute burst into the safety of hyperspace, but the battle wasn't over. The ship trembled violently as its engines struggled to compensate for the damage sustained during the sudden jump. On the bridge, warning lights flashed red, and the acrid scent of burnt wiring filled the air. Elias Rains clutched the armrests of his command chair, his knuckles turning white as he held his breath. They had made it out alive, but for how long? Status report, he barked. Commander Adira Vasquez was already on it. She leaned over her console, her fingers dancing across the interface as she scanned the ship's diagnostics. Jump successful. We're in the clear, for now. Shields. Kane wiped blood from a cut above his brow as he studied his console. down to 18%. Hull integrity compromised in sections D12 and F3. Forward armor is barely holding together. He cursed under his breath. We took a hell of a beating. Elias gritted his teeth. One more direct hit, and we would have been dead. But it wasn't just the damage that troubled him. It was the Dominion. They weren't just another spacefaring race. They were hunters. The way they moved, the way they waited for the Resolute to wander into their web. It was all calculated, efficient. The message they had sent was crystal clear. Humanity had trespassed, and the Dominion would not let them leave unpunished. Where the hell did they come from? Kane muttered, shaking his head. Never seen ships like that before. And that armor. Our plasma rounds didn't even scratch them. Sienna Hawthorne's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering. Captain, I'm looking at our jump logs. Something's off. Elias turned toward the nearest holoscreen. Talk to me, Chief. Sienna's face appeared on the flickering display. Her usually steady demeanor was tinged with frustration. We didn't make a clean jump. Something interfered with our trajectory. Vasquez frowned. Interfered. You think they did something, Sienna interrupted. We should have traveled at least 4 light years. Instead, we barely made it 1. That's not an accident, Captain. Elias felt his stomach sink. They had been expecting this. Are you saying they can disrupt our hyperspace jumps? Kane asked, his tone sharp. Sienna exhaled. I'm saying they might be able to track us. Silence fell over the bridge. If that were true, then they weren't safe. Not even in hyperspace. Elias stood up, his mind racing. If the Dominion had this kind of technology, then it meant 2 things. They weren't just watching. They were hunting. The Resolute was still prey. He turned to Vasquez. How much time until we drop out of hyperspace? 15 minutes, she replied. Then we'll be back in real space for recalibration. 15 minutes. Not enough time to make repairs. Not enough time to prepare for another fight. All right, Elias said, his voice steady despite the weight pressing on his chest. We're not waiting to see if they find us. We assume they already have. He turned to Kane. Weapons? Still online, but limited. We have enough plasma rounds for 1 full engagement. Maybe 2 if we're careful. Kane crossed his arms. But if their armor adapts like it did before, I don't like our odds. Elias clenched his jaw. Then we get creative. He turned to Vasquez. Find us a system to hide in. Somewhere with interference. Nebula, asteroid fields, anything. Vasquez nodded and pulled up the nearest star map. After a few seconds, she found a potential answer. There's a rogue planetoid in the Talrath sector. Atmosphere's thin, but the planet's riddled with underground caverns. If we shut down non-essential systems, we might be able to mask our energy signature inside. Elias nodded. That's our best shot. Set the coordinates. A blaring alarm interrupted them. Incoming energy surge detected. Vasquez's fingers flew across the console. No way. They found us already. Impossible. Kane growled. We're still in hyperspace. Sienna's voice returned, this time frantic. Captain, I told you. They're tracking us. They've locked onto our quantum wake. A terrifying realization settled over them. The Dominion wasn't chasing them. They were already here. A rift tore open in the fabric of space, just behind them. Elias barely had time to react before the first Dominion warship emerged from hyperspace, its monstrous frame materializing like a nightmare-given form. Then another, and another. They had followed the Resolute through the jump, and now they were closing in, braced for impact. Elias roared. The first plasma lance struck. The ship lurched violently as explosions rocked the hull. Sparks showered down from the ceiling, and warning sirens screamed across the command deck. Shields dropped to 9%. They're not giving us a chance to run. Vasquez shouted over the chaos. Elias's mind moved at light speed. They can track us. They can block our escape. They have superior firepower. We can't run. We can't fight. Then we changed the rules of the game. Elias slammed his fist against the console. Sienna cut all external power signatures, shut down everything except emergency life support. The bridge dimmed instantly as the Resolute went dark. They're closing in, Kane mourned. Elias turned to Vasquez. How close? Vasquez checked the readings. 3 kilometers and closing. Fast. Elias's eyes burned with determination. That's close enough. Turn the ship around, he ordered. Kane's eyes widened. What? Captain, are you insane? We can't take them head on. We're not fighting. Elias pointed at the nearest Dominion warship, now only a few thousand meters away. We're going to make them think we're already dead. The Resolute went into a slow, deliberate spin, mimicking a ship that had lost power. Its darkened hull drifted, lifeless, as if it had already been destroyed by the Dominion's attack. Elias watched the enemy ships carefully. They wouldn't waste resources on a kill that was already made. If they could just sell the illusion for a few minutes, they could slip away undetected. The bridge was silent as the crew held their breath. The Dominion warships loomed closer, scanning, watching. Then, after a long, tense moment, they slowed. The lead ship drifted past them, its weapons still hot, but its sensors searching elsewhere. The others followed suit, fanning out across the sector. Elias's gamble had worked. For now, hold position, he whispered, barely moving. Wait for my mark. The Dominion still believed they had won. But the Resolute was far from finished. Elias Rains had one last move left to play. And it would be the one that changed everything. The gamble of ghosts. The HSS Resolute hung in the void, drifting like a corpse in the aftermath of battle. Its once burning engines were now silent, its hull blackened by the energy blasts that had nearly torn it apart. To the Dominion warships, it looked like nothing more than wreckage, a lifeless shell of a vessel that had already succumbed to the inevitable. And that was exactly what Captain Elias Rains wanted them to believe. Every breath on the bridge was held in silent tension, the dim emergency lights barely illuminating the crew as they sat frozen in place. The Dominion warships loomed nearby, their sleek, monstrous forms scanning the battlefield, searching for any remaining threats. Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't give them a reason to look closer. Elias's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he studied the alien fleet on the main display. 3 primary warships, each the size of a city block, hovered like specters in the dark. 2 smaller escort vessels flanked them, bristling with weaponry. They weren't in a hurry. The Dominion had already won. As far as they were concerned, the Resolute was just another shattered remnant of a failed human incursion into their space, a message to be left behind for any other fools who dared to follow. Elias clenched his jaw. That's where they made their mistake. The Predator watches. A soft whisper crackled through the comms. It was Sienna Hawthorne, speaking from engineering. Captain, she murmured, barely above a whisper. We've got about 10 minutes before our core overheats. We can't run dark forever. Elias nodded slowly. The power core was still operational, but without cooling systems running at full capacity, it was building up thermal energy that would soon become detectable. If the Dominion warships didn't leave soon, they'd pick up the excess heat, and their deception would be over. Time was running out. He glanced at Commander Vasquez, who was watching him with sharp, questioning eyes. She knew what he was thinking before he even said it. We can't just sit here and wait to be found. Vasquez whispered. We need an exit plan. Elias inhaled deeply, forcing his mind to slow down. Think. There's always a way out. He studied the Dominion warships, analyzing their positions. They weren't just idling. Their smaller escorts were weaving through the debris, scanning wreckage for any survivors. The lead warship, the largest of them all, had its shields lowered, not completely, but enough. Their focus wasn't on defense anymore. Elias's fingers twitched. That was their weakness. The Resolute couldn't fight them head-on. Not with its current damage. Not with their adaptive armor. But it didn't have to. "We make them think they've already won," Elias said quietly, his voice barely above a breath. "We let them believe we're dead." And then, he tapped the console in front of him, highlighting the Dominion's lead warship. "We take their ship," turning the hunter into prey. Vasquez's eyes widened. "You're talking about a boarding maneuver?" Elias nodded. "They don't see us as a threat anymore. Their flagship shields are down. If we can latch onto their hull undetected, we might be able to infiltrate their systems from the inside." Kane let out a low whistle. "That's insane." "It's the only way." Silence fell over the bridge as the weight of the plan settled in. If they failed, they would die. If they succeeded, they would gain something even more valuable than survival: intel. A direct look into the Dominion's technology, their weapons, their navigation systems. A way to turn the tide before humanity even knew what kind of war it was about to fight. Vasquez sighed, rubbing her temples. "All right, let's do it." Elias turned to Kane. "Weapons?" Kane hesitated. "We still have a payload of magnetic grapplers and cutting charges, normally used for salvage operations." His eyes narrowed. "You're thinking we punch a hole in their hull and slip in through the breach?" Elias gave a sharp nod. "Exactly." Vasquez's fingers moved across the ship's interface. "If we launch the grapplers at low power, they won't detect them. We can use the emergency thrusters to drift toward their ship without drawing attention." Elias turned to Sienna. "Can you keep the power core stable long enough for us to pull this off?" Sienna's voice crackled back over the intercom. "I can try, but once we re-engage the systems, they'll know we're alive." Elias exhaled slowly. "Then we'll just have to make it count." The ghost ship moves. The Resolute began its slow, calculated drift toward the Dominion's flagship. The massive enemy vessel loomed ahead, its dark metallic hull almost indistinguishable from the void itself. 3 kilometers. 2. The Dominion fleet remained unaware, their sensors still focused outward. Vasquez released the first grappler. The thin cable shot through the darkness, latching onto the Dominion warship's underside. The magnetic clamps engaged silently, securing the Resolute to the enemy's hull. No response. The Dominion still didn't realize they were there. Elias turned to Kane. "Deploy the boarding team." A small group of highly trained Marines suited up in the airlock, their armor reinforced with kinetic plating, their rifles loaded with armor-piercing rounds designed for close-quarters combat. The airlock cycled. Then, with a faint hiss, the team was gone, moving through the darkness on grappling lines, their forms blending into the void. They landed against the Dominion hull, moving like shadows as they set the charges. The bridge was silent as they waited. Then, a muffled explosion. The hull breach was small, precise, enough for them to slip inside. Elias's heart pounded. They were inside the beast. The Dominion interior was dark and pulsing with an eerie blue glow. The walls weren't just metal. They were alive, shifting with biomechanical veins that pulsed with unseen energy. This wasn't just a ship. It was something else, something living. Elias's calm crackled as the lead Marine, Sergeant Dorian Price, whispered, "Captain, you're going to want to see this." Elias watched through the helmet cam as the Marines moved deeper. The hallways twisted and curved in unnatural ways, as if the ship was shifting around them. Then they reached the control center, and there, standing motionless in a chamber filled with glowing control panels, were the pilots. But they weren't piloting anything. They were connected, long, biomechanical tendrils extending from their bodies into the ship itself. Their eyes were empty, their limbs unmoving. "Captain," Price whispered, "they're part of the ship. They're not just flying it. They are the ship." Elias's mind reeled. The Dominion wasn't just using technology. They were becoming it. And if humanity was to stand a chance against them, they needed to understand it. Fast. Elias's voice was steady, but filled with urgency. Download everything you can. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about winning the war before it even started.